I remember the way we used to sing along to those old skeletal rhymes, tracing the connection from one bone to the next. It was a simple, rhythmic melody that seemed to stick in the back of your mind forever. At this very moment, there is likely a grown man somewhere out there unconsciously whistling a theme song he hasn't actually listened to in over 30 years. It is funny how those childhood tunes never truly leave our souls. That is the specific magic of the Munsters. The show carved out a quiet little corner in your memory, waiting patiently in a room of your brain you had completely forgotten existed. It only took 2 brief seasons inside that drafty, cobweb-covered mansion to change the landscape of television history forever. You often wonder how so much heart could fit into such a short span of time. We watched a household of literal monsters who somehow managed to love one another with more sincerity than any normal family on the screen back then. They showed us all that being different didn't mean being unloved, but behind those heavy prosthetics and thick layers of paint lay real stories of quiet desperation and endurance. For some, the makeup became a cage they couldn't escape, while for others, it was the only lifeline they had left. The paths they took afterward were as wild as any Hollywood script, leading one toward a political run for governor while another barely escaped with their life. Their journeys off camera were far more dramatic than anything filmed at Mockingbird Lane. Then there was the great Fred Gwynne, the man who gave Herman Munster his gentle soul. He used to joke that even his own wife wouldn't dare let him lean in for a kiss when he was in full character. He entered the world as Frederick Hubbard Gwynne on July 10th, 1926. A boy with a destiny far larger than life itself. He was born into an era of classic cinema that he would eventually help redefine. Hailing from the streets of New York City, he was a Harvard-educated intellectual, standing 6'5", a man whose heart beat for the high drama of Shakespeare. He never imagined he would become a global icon for something so vastly different. Instead of the Elizabethan stage, fate handed him 50 pounds of heavy foam, rubber, and a signature bolt through his neck. It was a heavy burden to carry, both in a literal sense and for his professional reputation. That massive, imposing physical presence meant there was never really any other choice for the role of Herman. He was built for the character in a way that no other actor could ever hope to match or replicate. The very first pilot episode was essentially constructed around his unique physicality and impressive stature. Every single morning began with a grueling 3-hour marathon in the cold makeup chair before the sun even rose. Sitting through that transformation was incredibly exhausting, and he would often lose as much as 10 pounds of water weight from sweating under the hot studio lights. It was a physical sacrifice few in the audience ever truly realized. You have to understand that Fred was an incredibly sharp and deeply intellectual man. He wasn't just a recognizable face in a mask. He was a profound thinker through and through. He was the kind of person who would dive deep into a heated debate if he felt a subject truly mattered to the craft. He never backed down from a thoughtful discussion about the world or the art of performance. Though he described the costume as a bruising and exhausting ordeal, he pushed through 68 episodes without a single word of protest. But when the lights finally dimmed, the shadow of the monster threatened to bury his career forever to every director in town. He was just that recognizable forehead, and they completely forgot about the sophisticated Harvard graduate underneath. His personal life suffered as well, weathered by the storms of 2 different divorces. He raised 5 children and navigated through a long, silent stretch where the phone simply stopped ringing as often as it once had. It was a period of deep reflection and quiet persistence for the gentle giant. During those quiet years, he wrote wonderful children's stories that surprised everyone who only saw him as a television creature. Then, in 1992, a film called My Cousin Vinny gave him the chance to finally step out of the dark. As the stern Judge Chamberlain Haller, he delivered the performance of a lifetime, reminding the entire world of his true range. It was the redemptive moment he had been waiting for after all those years in the shadows. There were no prosthetics and no gimmicks. Just a sharp, brilliant actor proving the talent that had been there from the very start. Tragically, the universe didn't give him much time to enjoy his newfound freedom. On July 2nd, 1993, the curtain finally fell when pancreatic cancer took Fred Gwynne away from us. It felt like the sudden end of a beautiful era for those who grew up under his gentle shadow. When it came to television fathers, he was the kind of warm and protective figure every child wished they had in their own living room. He brought a peculiar kind of dignity to fatherhood that remains largely unmatched. Those who worked beside him often cherished the quiet moments between takes, especially those intimate father and son chats that felt so genuine. There was a real bond there that transcended the written script. He was only 66 years old, having barely seen a full year pass since his greatest cinematic triumph. He left behind a lasting legacy and a modest estate valued at approximately $2 million. During his final conversations with the press, and he spoke of Herman as a dear old friend, he simply couldn't help but adore. It was a touching reconciliation with the character that had come to define his life's work. It is a beautiful irony that the most frightening-looking father on television was actually the most tender soul on the entire set. He proved to us all that appearances are rarely a true reflection of a man's heart. He was living proof that sometimes the monsters among us make the finest family men, but every great man needs a partner. Which brings us to the elegant Yvonne De Carlo, our beloved Lily Munster, born as Margaret Yvonne Middleton in Vancouver on September 1st, 1922. She was destined for the silver screen. Her journey from the north to the heart of Hollywood is a story of sheer grace and grit, long before she ever donned a pair of fangs or a shroud. She was already considered true Hollywood royalty. She moved through the industry with a poise and a presence that few could ever hope to emulate. Throughout the 1950s, she shared the screen with giants like Charlton Heston in The Ten Commandments, standing out as one of the most radiant beauties of the era. She was the definition of classic Tinseltown glamour. She once reflected on her long career, noting that many people often forgot the grand spectacles and biblical epics she had been a part of. Her path was far more varied and prestigious than most fans ever realized. But just as she reached the very heights of her profession, the foundation of her world began to crumble. It was a sudden and terrifying descent that no one could have predicted for a star of her magnitude. She had married a brave stuntman named Bob Morgan back in 1955. But tragedy struck in 1961 when a train sequence went horribly wrong. Bob suffered a devastating injury that cost him his leg. The financial burden of the mounting medical bills was absolutely overwhelming. And suddenly, the leading role she was used to began to disappear. She found herself standing on the edge of a very dark and uncertain precipice. So when Universal came to her with the role of Lily Munster, a vampire matriarch in a supernatural comedy, it was an unexpected offer. It was a far cry from the sweeping epics of her glamorous past. Yvonne did not sign that contract out of a passion for the script or the genre. She did it as a desperate act of love to keep her household afloat. It was a choice made out of survival, not vanity. In later years, she would often laugh and say she only took the job to pay the bills. While there was humor in her voice, you could always sense the hidden pain of a fallen star doing what she had to for her family. Despite her personal reasons, she transformed Lily into an unforgettable icon of the small screen. From that striking white streak in her hair to her elegant, sweeping gowns, she was absolute perfection. There was a genuine magic in the way she gazed at Herman, making us believe he truly was the most charming man in the world. Their love felt real and enduring. Even through the thick layers of gray makeup, she always spoke of her husband on the show as a man who possessed a natural, innate kindness that simply couldn't be taught. She saw the inner beauty in him that the rest of the world often missed. She would look at him and ask if he wasn't the sweetest soul around. and he would humbly reply that he certainly did his best. It was a dynamic that felt like a warm, comforting embrace for the audience. She was the grace that held that bizarre household together, bringing a level of sophistication that no screenwriter could have ever put into words. She turned a caricature into a real, breathing, and loving mother. When the series finally ended, her personal life faced another storm, as her marriage eventually fell apart. By 1973, she was divorced and left to raise her two sons, mostly on her own. She reclaimed her spotlight through theater and a personal memoir before finally stepping away from the screen in 1995. Yvonne took her final bow on January 8, 2007, at 84, as her weary heart finally found rest. The cinematic temptress who once danced with darkness became the elegant matriarch who simply wanted her strange family to belong. Then came Al Lewis, the unforgettable grandpa. If Fred was the heart and Yvonne the soul, Al was pure chaos. Believe me, his actual life was far more unpredictable than any strange experiments conducted in that spooky family cellar. He entered this world as Abraham Meister on April 30th, 1923, right in the bustling heart of New York. Before the cameras rolled, he lived many lives: a street youth, a fierce activist, and even a traveling stage performer. The man possessed a vibrant energy that could easily power an entire city block. He had already developed a sharp comedic bond with Fred Gwynne while filming their earlier series about urban police officers. So, when the chance for a supernatural sitcom arrived, it felt like a long-awaited gathering of old and dear friends. A simple phone call arrived, asking if he might be interested in a brand new television pilot they were developing. At the start, he suspected a foolish friend was just trying to pull a fast one with a practical joke. Those two shared a natural, electric connection on screen that no amount of acting could ever truly hope to replicate. They were inseparable companions who found their greatest joy in making one another collapse into fits of genuine laughter. As the family patriarch, Al crafted one of the most cherished television figures to emerge from the 1960s era. He portrayed a centenarian vampire in retirement, passing time in his workshop creating wild inventions that had a habit of exploding. Between offering hilariously poor guidance, he managed to effortlessly command every single scene he was ever a part of. With a bit of his secret magic, children adored him because he was the one adult who remained a child. Parents were equally charmed because Al was naturally, effortlessly hilarious in a way that never required the help of recorded laughter. Unlike his co-star, Al fully leaned into the heavy makeup, the flowing cape, and the entire theatrical monster aesthetic. He cherished the role deeply, frequently appearing in his full macabre costume for his fans for the rest of his journey. However, this is exactly where the story of Al Lewis takes a turn that absolutely no one could have predicted. Once the series ended, he did not pursue further fame. Instead, he opened a famous Italian eatery in Greenwich Village, known as Grandpa's Bella Gente, to welcome his local neighbors. Imagine a horror-themed pasta house in Lower Manhattan that eventually transformed into a legendary and beloved fixture of the community. Al jokingly claimed his pasta sales brought in more wealth than any of the royalty checks from his television work. Given how little that cast was actually paid, there was likely a great deal of truth in his witty remark. He later hosted a late-night radio program on WBAI and became an outspoken voice for social justice. He was bold, vocal, and completely unforgettable. Then, in 1998, at 75 years old, he actually entered the race for the governorship of New York State, the famous vampire patriarch running for high office. It sounds like fiction, but this really happened in our history. He lost the race, naturally, but secured enough support to keep his political party on the ballot for years to come. That was his true goal. As he navigated the political world with the same playful, theatrical flair as his acting, He was loud, clever, and always playful. Al shared his life with two wives. First Marge Damowitz, and later his devoted partner, the actress Karen Ingenthron. He raised 3 sons, leaving behind a beautifully loud legacy. He passed away on February 3rd, 2006, at 82, after living a life that was completely, naturally full. There were no scandals or quiet fades. He left the stage exactly as he lived on his own terms. Still the beloved patriarch, and still wearing a smile. He was the ancient grandfather who looked over a century old but kept the mischievous spirit of a young boy. He was the family's wildest soul. Now, let's look at Beverly Owen, who first brought Marilyn to life. This is a career tale that lasted only 13 episodes but left an impression spanning an entire lifetime. Long before the spotlight, Beverly Jane Owen was born in Ottumwa, Iowa, on May 13th, 1937. To a quiet family, she arrived in the City of Stars with the same shimmering hopes as 1,000 other young women seeking fame. Remarkably, she managed to climb much higher. She stepped into the role of Marilyn Munster, the ordinary niece within the Munster family mansion. While viewers saw her beauty, the family saw tragic plainness, a clever twist on vanity. Beverly Owen brought a soft, wholesome warmth that made the ironic joke work perfectly. I would love for you to meet my date. Here is Jack. Oh, uncle, but she felt trapped. The hours and work were truly grueling. And Beverly had deeply fallen for a man named John Stone. A call came to film a pilot. But my heart was in love. I didn't want to move. They said, try the pilot. So, I did. He would later go on to help create the world of Sesame Street. After only 13 episodes, she told the producers her time was finished. She chose marriage and a real life. Hollywood replaced her and just moved forward. She found herself weeping and weeping without any end. And eventually, she did not even want to go to the studio. Beverly married John Stone in 1964, staying true to her own heart. A specific detail here makes this story feel much more poignant. John Stone became a mastermind of Sesame Street while her show ran elsewhere. The husband of the first Marilyn was working behind the scenes, building one of the most important children's shows in the history of television. 2 separate legacies were moving forward from the same quiet, suburban home. They raised 2 daughters. When the marriage ended, she left the acting world behind. She returned to the classroom. She earned a history degree and became a respected college professor, living a dignified, non-Hollywood life for the next 40 years. She never did conventions or reunions, never looking back at her short fame, not out of bitterness. She simply chose a different road and stayed on it. Her mother died young in 1953. Later, Beverly faced ovarian cancer. She passed away on February 21st, 2019, at 81. The actress who launched a legend chose reality. She traded the spotlight for a real life and never looked back once. Pat Priest, another Marilyn Munster. The first, Marilyn walked away, but her successor outlasted almost every other cast member. Patricia Ann Priest was born in August 1936 in Bountiful, Utah, at 28. She inherited the role after Beverly Owen had finally departed. During my screen test, I happened to fit into all Beverly old costumes. They styled my hair like hers, and I had the right look to play the niece for 57 episodes and the film Munster Go Home. Pat grasped a nuance about Marilyn that was often easy to miss. The joke wasn't her face. It was that love is truly blind. This family adored each other so much they ignored the worldview. Pat played the role with sweetness, never overacting, letting the family pure love be the source of true comedy. Behind the scenes, Pat felt pressure to remain slender and camera-ready. Being the beauty in a monster house carried its own unique kind of weight. The legendary Yvonne de Carlo stepped in, acting as a gentle guiding light for her. As for young Butch Patrick, he turned into a forever friend. A little brother she shares laughs with even now. Once the doors to the spooky mansion closed, Pat navigated the familiar path of a traveling guest star. She popped up on Perry Mason and Bewitched, hitting all the classic stops for a busy actress in the late 1960s. Yet, she eventually traded the bright spotlights for the quiet hills of Idaho, finding a new calling in the world of real estate. It was a peaceful, grounded existence until 2001, when a diagnosis of non-Hodgkin lymphoma changed everything. With incredible strength, she faced the illness and triumphed, remaining in healthy remission for more than 20 years now. At 89 years old, Pat Priest still delights crowds at fan gatherings, often standing right beside her old friend, Butch Patrick. The faces in the crowd still know her, and the letters of appreciation continue to find their way to her doorstep. 6 decades have passed since she played the girl her monsterkin famously viewed as the unfortunate plain one. She was the ordinary niece who was actually a classic beauty, and her mailbag is still full of notes from fans who agree. Then there was Butch Patrick, the boy behind Eddie Munster. And there is a special reason we held his story for the end. Born Patrick Allen Lilly on August 2nd, 1953. He entered the world in the sunny suburbs of Englewood, California, just a young boy of 11. He stepped into the oversized shoes of the iconic Eddie Munster. He was that tiny werewolf with the sharp ears and signature hair who spent his days just trying to be a normal kid. The journey that brought him to Mockingbird Lane was one of those strange Hollywood miracles that only happen to children. It all started simply enough when his own sister landed a contract with a local modeling agency. That single door opening led to an audition, where Butch managed to stand out among 500 other hopeful young boys. When the producers decided to move in a new direction after the pilot, the first child actor was let go, practically overnight. An 11-year-old from Englewood transformed into the most beloved little monster on the small screen. Young Eddie served as the emotional heartbeat of the household, the innocent soul in a house full of shadows. He was a little wolf boy who loved his dragon pet, navigating the hallways of school while trying his best to belong. He often wondered if his father was simply spending the night playing cards with some friends from work. In truth, his character was the vital link connecting the eccentric world of the Munsters to the purity of childhood. Butch genuinely enjoyed those hours in the makeup chair and cherished the company of his on-screen family. He shared a deep, enduring connection with Pat Priest, a sibling-like bond that has remained unbroken for 60 long years. From everything we know, those filming days were a source of real happiness and wonder for the young actor. He once jokingly suggested his aunt might look lovely dressed up as a glamorous lady gorilla or something equally charming. However, the real challenges arrived later. Even though Butch continued to find work once the series concluded, he moved on to shows like Lidsville, taking various guest appearances and lending his voice to animated projects. As the 1970s arrived, the roles began to dry up, and a shadow known as addiction started to creep into his life. This wasn't the flashy life of a rock star, but rather a quiet, downward spiral into a very lonely kind of darkness. That difficult struggle ended up consuming almost 2 entire decades, covering the 70s and the bulk of the 80s. The boy who once stopped traffic in the local grocery store suddenly found himself feeling completely unseen by the world. That sense of being forgotten was a poison all its own. As the werewolf boy who brought joy to millions fought a lonely war, then, adding to his burdens, he received the devastating news of a prostate cancer diagnosis. It was the sort of moment that stops a man cold, forcing him to decide what truly matters in this life. Faced with his own mortality, Butch made the brave decision to stand his ground and fight back. He entered recovery in 2010, finally finding clarity and sobriety before embarking on an incredible new chapter. He chose to build his future upon the very foundation that most former child celebrities spend their lives trying to escape. Rather than merely accepting the shadow of Eddie Munster, he fully embraced the role and made it his own legacy. He launched a business dedicated to the show and even took ownership of the legendary Dragula, Grandpa's famous coffin-style dragster,